Welcome, dear friends, brothers and sisters, to our class today, Family Communication. My name is Cvetan Petkov, and I'm pastor of International Missionary Society, dealing with family counseling in many years. We would like to go forward and touch different important topics related to communication, which is a very extensive and big subject. We're going to talk about encoding and decoding of our messages, and also we are going to touch different styles of conversation which we should apply in our family relationship. Before we go forward, I wish to have a silent prayer. Join me, please. Amen. Let's go forward to see what the Bible says about this communication. The importance of communication is in many places in the Bible. Apostle Paul personally speaks very much about communication and how this should be done. And this is in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 7, 8, and 9. And even things without life, giving sound, whether pipe or harp, except they give a distinction in the sound, how shall we know what is pipe or harp? For if the trumpets give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself for the battle? So likewise ye, except ye utter by the tongue words, easy to be understood, how shall it be known what is spoken? For ye shall speak into the air. This Bible verses, it tells us that our communication must be understandable. It needs to be communicated in a simple words, in a simple manner, understandable for the receiver. We need to understand that the conversation and the communication is something very important, and we need to train ourselves so that we can improve our form and our manner of communication. Why is that so important to communicate in the family? Between children and parents, between husband and wife, and even between the parents and their extended families and friends. Because if we don't communicate, we begin to accumulate. The accumulation of information turns to be burdensome if we don't share with somebody, if we don't communicate. The accumulation also, it's a subject of our own interpretation and our own decodification, which could be wrong. And then what's going to happen is that sometimes a husband or wife that does not communicate with other part have a cloud of information, have a cloud of burden, which in one moment can be discharged. Because we're burdened, because we have so much we have not communicated, when the opportunity for communication takes place, then it is a discharge of information. It's too much, which could be misinterpreted by the other side. Also, if we're overburdened with information we have not shared with other sides, it's possible that the way we communicate is not friendly. And this is the same with the children and parents and children. Many times children go to school, they have problems, they have challenges, they have friends, they have questions raised up by the program or the school teachings they receive and the faith of the parents. And if they don't communicate that with the parents does not give the opportunity to the children to share, what is happening is exactly that. It's an accumulation and there is a discharge. One day when the parents ask the children, why have you low grades or why you behave this way, then the children just discharge. And many times because the burden is there, they don't share exactly what the burden is, but they just share their angry attitude, and this create another, actually in the state to be a useful communications turns to be a problem. Similar is the situation between wife and husband and wife. Many times the men, we are not so communicative, we don't feel the needs of communicating so much, but many times the women's needs these communications, and they accumulate and accumulate, and one day if the husband gives the opportunity, or he accuses the wife of something, or he asks something, the discharge takes place. The conflicts in general in family are based on this problem: accumulation and discharge. Lack of communication always brings into conflicts and problems. That's why the solution is more communication. And we're going to see that there are many different ways of communications, many things to talk about. And if somebody says, I don't know what shall I talk with my wife, or I don't know what shall I talk with my husband, with my children we talk but we don't understand each other, please be tuned in this lecture, and we are going to touch these important points. How to communicate. There are different ways of communication. We're going to see one communication is by words. We speak and then the other person receives this message, but this is very limited way of communication. Our gesticulations, our eyes, our mouth, our face expression, the tone of the voice, and the position of our body, they give a lot of information. And the communication, it's a very extensive topic. We're not going to have the time to touch everything. The important part of communication is, let's remember what Apostle Paul says, is that we be understood, that our information is delivered properly and that the other person understands it properly and he can give a response. This is the art of communication. In modern time there is also other kind of communication. One of them is the cell phone, and many people use that, texting, and this is becoming so important and so preferable communication, because the person have the opportunity to wrap up, to text, to formulate better its thoughts and to deliver a message. This is very limited form, much more limited form of communication compared to a conversation and personal face-to-face conversation. However, we see that there is a lot of this kind of communication, as you see here in the picture. Sometimes the girl and her boyfriend, they are sitting in a bench and they don't talk to each other, they text to each other. It's the texting begin to be a very preferable form of communication because of fear that the real communication, face-to-face communication, will fail. We can do a mistake, an error. We prefer to hide behind the screen of the phone. We prefer that Google check my spelling and suggest me some synonyms, and this is all because we fear, or the young generation fear communication. It's very important that we don't fear, but we go forward and we communicate. Let's see what is the most important in communication and why sometimes we have problems in the communication. Before we go into the different methods of communicating and conversating with others, we want to see what is actually communication and which are the elements of the communications. Here is a schedule. We see that we have a sender and we have a receiver. The sender is encoding the message, and this is something we need to understand how this functions. Our brain has to have an idea, sometimes a picture, sometimes a vision of something, but now this idea has to be wrapped up, has to be formulated in an abstract manner. It has to be expressed in words. This expression in words, so this conversion of information for our mind to our words, is encoding. We are encoding our understanding into words. Same thing happens if we are texting with the phone. We have idea in our mind, but then we need to convert this idea into words. We need to type it down. Language is another issue. We need to put it in English or in Spanish or in Russia, whatever language it is, and that is another barrier that our mind have to face. We encode our message, then we deliver the message by speaking. The delivering takes place with our voice, with our face expression, with our gesticulation, and then the receiver get the message. He has to decode that message. He has to unwrap this, and he has to understand what we have said. That's why Apostle Paul says it's very important that we use the right sound of the trumpet. It's very important that we use the right words, that they are understandable to the public, to the receiver, so that the receiver can decode and understand what we are saying. Additional to that, there is a noise and disturbance all around, and there is also different channels of communication. Encoding can be compared to a wrapping package. Let's just imagine for a moment that our conversation actually is like giving a gift to somebody. I have a message I have to deliver. For example, I want to communicate to my child that we're going to celebrate his or her birthday. Now, this is a message that I have to deliver. But now, how am I going to deliver? First, I have to wrap this gift. I have to find the words. How am I going to formulate the message? Many times we don't even think about, because we speak spontaneously. We don't even take time to prepare for conversation. And closer the person is to us, less we think about wrapping up, the encoding. How are we going to encode the message? But that's not have not been like this all the time. For example, we can see that the North American Indians, when they were talking, especially official speeches, they will present the speeches in poetical form. They will use metaphors, they will use the sky, they will use the earth, they will use their religion to express in a symbolic, poetical way their speeches. Not only the North American Indians, but also in Arabic culture, the high level of the society, they often express themselves in poetical form when they were speaking. That's also all give us the idea that this encoding or wrapping the conversation or the message have been very important in the human history. And we're going to see in the testimony that we really need to be very careful how we enwrap or encode our message. Delivering is also very important. As I already mentioned, this is the tone of our voice. This is our face expressions, this is our body language, this is our mood. Imagine that you're preparing a gift and you go to your wife or to husband and you draw it away and say, take your gift, that's what I bought for you. How that will be accepted? This will have very negative impact. Or if you say, okay, I am married in the church, there is no divorce possible in our faith, So I can abuse on my wife and I can abuse on my husband. I can say whatever I want and I don't care how I encode the conversation or how I present the messages. What that means that we are delivering and wrapping up and preparing the message in a very negative way. Depending on how we wrap the conversation or how we wrap the message, how we deliver, that is how the decoding takes place. And the decoding in this case is unwrapping the package. It has to be dismantled and have to be opened and have to be seen, have to be analyzed, and then it's come the response, the reaction of the receiver. Let's see what the Spirit of Prophecy says about how we're going to, or how we are supposed to encode and decode our communication. Let the conversation at the family board be such as calculated to leave a fragrant influence on the mind of the children. What shall be our conversation? Calculated to leave fragrant influence. What that means. Before we do the conversation, we need to think how to wrap up, how to encode the conversation. What kind of words we shall use, which kind of words I cannot use, which kind of topics I should select, how am I going to express, how I'm going to deliver, what kind of tone in my voice I should have. Shall I have a joyful, smiling face? Or I shall have a sour, angry face? All of that have incredible impact into the mind of our children. And that's exactly what the Spirit of Prophecy says. This is a testimony in Adventist Home, page 440 in English. Let's see another testimony. We know the Bible speaks about 2 or 3 witnesses. If the Lord abides with us, we shall feel that we are members of the Christ family in heaven. We shall realize that angels are watching us, and our manners will be gentle and forbearing. We shall be fitted up to the entrance in the courts of heaven. How? Now, be careful. By cultivating courtesy and godliness. Our conversation will be holy and our thoughts will be upon heavenly things. So we need to cultivate a manner of conversation. We need to cultivate a manner of godly conversation and communication. Why is used the word cultivating? Because we need to learn it. We need to sit down and think, how am I going to communicate? How am I going to speak? We need to understand that the speaking and communication is not such a easy thing. So we need to have a preparation, a cultivation. We need to educate ourselves how to communicate. Let's see the problematic in communication, and this is encoding, decoding, and here we are, in other words, which is the interpretation. Here we have in this illustration a girl and boy sitting in a table, and the girl is the sender of the message and the boy is the receiver. And the girl says, "Your food smells delicious." Immediately she receives a positive answer. Thanks. Now, this is the superficial point of the conversation, the basic conversation or the basic communication. Your food smells delicious. Very positive message. Well wrapped, nicely presented, with a smile in its face. It's wonderful. Also, the answer comes in a similar way. Usually, the way you deliver the message, that is the way how you will receive the answer. If you are friendly, you will receive friendly answer. If you're angry, you will receive an angry answer. Many times our communication is a mirror-like communication. I show in the mirror angry face. the mirror show me an angry face. I show to the mirror smiling face, the mirror show me smiling face. So it's also when I am communicating with somebody else. The problem here is that when this simple communication takes place, there is an interpretation. And the boy says, she wants to try a bite. The girl didn't say she wants to try a bite. That's far away. She just said, your food smells delicious. But the boy is making an interpretation of that's what the girl says. And that is the problematic. Many times the information is encoding in such a form that the decoding takes place and have different understanding. In addition, come the interpretation of what the other says, seeking hidden messages, seeking something that the other maybe wants to say but don't say, and then comes our personal prejudice, then come our personal ideas, and this is very difficult also between different cultures. We have different interpretation of the signs, different interpretation of expressions, and that brings many times to so-called misunderstanding. Let's go to the Bible and see if that's really happened among the disciples, among the people of God, and we're going to see that yes, indeed, this misunderstanding happens. And we have here Jesus with his disciples. In John chapter 11, verse 11 to 13, Jesus communicates to his disciples the death of their friend Lazarus. This thing says he, Jesus. And after that he says unto them, our friend Lazarus slept, but I go that I may awake him out of sleep. Now, Lazarus is friend of all of the disciples, and Jesus is preparing a message very nicely wrapped up. Like, you know, he doesn't want to hurt the feeling of the disciples. He knows how painful is the idea of death to us as humans, and he's presenting it in a very nice form, presenting the death as a sleep. However, when he presents this message, deliver it to the disciples, then says his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. What's happened? They totally dismantle this message. They totally misunderstand this message. They decode the message wrong. And they interpret the word of the Master in exactly the opposite direction. If Jesus is saying that he is asleep, he wanted to say he dies. But they understand that if he sleeps, he will improve his health. Howbeit Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought that he has spoken of things of rest in sleep. Later on, Jesus clarified his speech and he says, no, he died. Another misunderstanding takes place. The disciples believe he was killed by the Jews, and they say, let's go and defend. Many times this misunderstanding takes place, and we see that we as a believer, we are not excluded of these options and of this possibility of encoding and decoding wrongly, which means that it's very important for us that we be prepared, that we know these difficulties exist, that we are not prejudiced when we hear something that we don't like, and we don't come to conclusion immediately when we hear messages that sound very strange and difficult for us to understand. But with more questions, we clarify this bubble of information. With additional questions, we actually tune our understanding in the communication, and we understand, okay, that is what he or she wants to tell me. Many times it's like the disciples and Jesus, he speaks here, I understand here. There are different forms of communication, let's say like that, and here we have 4 examples of different forms of communication and conversation. One thing is the basic conversation. Another is the intellectual conversation. Then we're going to see the spiritual conversation, and finally heart-to-heart communication. The basic communication is actually something that goes straight forward. These are short messages and receiving feedback. This conversation is based on very limited information and very obvious subjects, such as food. I want to buy tomatoes, potatoes. We have to buy bread. I'm hungry. What are you going to cook for lunch? So it is a conversation that is not exposed on interpretation. It's not exposed and misunderstanding, because it's based on facts and based on visible items. Another thing is work. I'm tired. I'm going to work. I went and I have this and that friend there, and I did this, I did that. It is very straightforward information that is based on facts, visible and most likely well known already. That's why it's called basic conversation. Another topic of that is a children's life. The child tells me like this, my daughter tells me like that. That's happened to my son, that's happened to my daughter. He broke his leg, he hurt himself, he couldn't sleep. It's also based on facts that the children have communicated to the mother or to the father. Another basic conversation could happen based on the basic needs that we all have. This is, I want to buy new shoes because the old shoes are damaged, the car that doesn't work properly, and all that, all conversation that have to do with the basic needs, which all know very well, then it is a basic conversation. Many times people say, I don't know what shall I converse. There is no subject of conversation. No, dear brothers and sisters, there are many subjects of conversation. Another important topic is the basic personal information. You wake up in the morning and you ask, how did you sleep? So that a person communicates, respond and say, I sleep well, I didn't sleep well, I have headache, I didn't have headache. See, this all is communication and conversation based on basic topics in our life. The Bible recommends us to keep this kind of basic communication. Matthew chapter 5 verse 37 says, but let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than this comes of evil. Why the Lord says that? Because the basic communication, yea, yea, nay, nay, means very clear, expressed. No the Greece area, no symbolic things that are there, no interpretation needed. That helps very much so that the communication takes place easily, understandable, and there is no place and possibility of misinterpretation. If we have problem in our family, if we fight because of misunderstandings, then it's very important that we cultivate ourselves to keep our conversation in a level of a basic communication. This will strengthen our trust. This will let us this will help us to build up more peaceful environment, especially where the children are around. and this will help us to grow until another form of communication is possible. Another form of communication is a conversation, is the intellectual one. What is the intellectual conversation? That has to do with analysis of second part, of another thing, text, news, this all, or a complicated situation which need to be analyzed and certain conclusion need to be take place. This is an intellectual conversation. The intellectual conversation is more challenging and needs a level of growth, need a level of tolerance. For example, if my partner, wife or husband or my children, we are in intellectual conversation, it is possible that we demonstrate difference of opinion. My daughter have maybe one opinion, I have another opinion, and my wife have a third independent opinion. We need to grow so far that we will not be offended if somebody have different opinion. If we don't have this growth, this spiritual level, this intellectual level, we will have very difficult to lead intellectual conversation, because we will end up fighting, we will end up offended, and that is obviously a disaster. For example, one form of intellectual conversation is when we compare different sources. Right now, for example, one of the issues that is always in the news is COVID-19. We have this pandemic. And in this pandemic, if we read, we're going to see different of opinions. The World Health Organization says we have to wear masks. However, there are other medical institution that says no, it's not good to wear mask. So comparing information of one side and another side, we're going to see that there's difference of opinion. If we do the research and compare one information with the other, discuss, analyze with my wife, with my children, this is an intellectual conversation. This is an intellectual communication. And as I already mentioned, it's very possible that in the end of such a communication, we end up with difference of opinion. Another important source of intellectual conversation are the news and newspapers or internet news information. What happened is that we could see, let's say, election coming. There's one candidate, another candidate. There is a news about different continents, about different countries, about different issues like nature and warming of the climate problems, and new cars coming up, and new technology development. All that's a different subject. We can wrap up intellectual conversation because we analyze the text of the news. I remember Martin Luther King. He was stating that since he was a child, when he goes to lunch from his father, was required that he brings, everybody who goes to the table need to bring something into the table, need to be prepared. For intellectual conversations, we need to be prepared. We need to read something that the other people doesn't know. We need to collaborate with something, with opinion, with idea. And that's why intellectual conversation can take place when we are prepared, when we need to read, we need to study, we need to have an open mind to analyze things. Then we could be able to enter into intellectual conversations. Here are some examples: analysis of text or ideas, we just covered that. Planning and budget is another topic very important. We need to plan our life, our future, the future of the family. The budget, how much money we earn and how much we spend. A limitation of our budget, this is intellectual conversation. Education of our children. We need to plan depending on the ideas what our children wants to be. Where are they going to study? Investment is another topic, very important. What are you going to do with your earnings? How you can invest your funds so that they multiply and give you more income. Creative projects, very important. We want to repaint the house. What kind of color? We want to buy furniture. What kind of furniture? How our home will look like. This is also another project. The home you see behind me is a project that we have developed with my wife and my daughter. Playing together. It's another intellectual communication and conversation. We can do this. There are a lot of Bible games, and it's wonderful when children and parents play together. This is very recommendable to take place, and it's a very refreshing experience. However, we can always have somebody winning and somebody losing. Once again, we need to be able to suffer, lose, or to give up in favor of our children, and that's required, again, a little bit higher level of tolerance when we can tolerate somebody else to have different opinion. Sharing personal ideas, very important. When we read, when we study, our children, they begin to have ideas. My wife can have ideas. I can have different ideas. This communication is very important because then we feel understood and we feel very loved and very warm in our environment. Spiritual conversation is another one, very much recommended by the Spirit of Prophecy. And this is all conversation, very similar to the intellectual conversations, but now based on the Bible, based on the Spirit of Prophecy text, based on religious texts. According to the Spirit of Prophecy, virtually any entry point can be used to launch a spiritual conversation. We need to, if we begin with intellectual conversation, if we analyze the news, we should end up with a spiritual analyzing or spiritual interpretation of it, considering the prophecy, the end of time, preparation of coming of Christ. Whatever conversation we use should end up with the spiritual topic. And this is very important, not only inside the family, not only with our children, but also with our colleagues and the surrounding environment in our working place, our neighborhood. That's how we could share the gospel. Here is a testimony about a spiritual conversation. We can be overcomers only by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. By a well-ordered life, a good conversation, we become light in the church and in the world. Spiritual things must be spiritual discerned. How we overcome? By godly conversation, among the other things. So, and he says, by well-ordered life and godly conversation. We need to have a well-ordered conversation. Why that is necessary? Because that's how we can be decoded by our neighbors, by everybody who listens to us, by our children, by well-ordered, cultivated, well wrapped up, encoded messages delivered in a very nice, beautiful form. This will be decoded spiritually, and this will have incredible impact. A spiritual conversation should happen naturally. Not necessary that we take all the family, take the Bible in the hand and say, now we're going to have a spiritual conversation. No, it could be in a very natural atmosphere, as the picture shows here, this family. It could be that we sit and we begin the conversation in a very relaxing way. But then, as that illustration shows, the conversation should be moved into heavenly things and to the life of Jesus Christ until the coming events, so that our children can be naturally guided to this beautiful light coming of the Lord. The last one of communication or conversation is heart-to-heart communication. Here we have this picture, the girl and her mother, they holding hands, they're looking each other in the eyes, and the girl is just shooting and talking and talking and talking. This is a type of conversation when there is no wrapped up. The encoding actually takes place in a very natural form without even thinking. Words are just shot out in the way as the person feels it, but is not sure if these words really reflect exactly what the mind says. And the mother is there to receive all that and be very careful how to guide and delegate her daughter. This kind of heart-to-heart communication is happen very often. Unfortunately, sometimes this heart-to-heart communication takes place where it's not supposed to happen. Because if we do heart-to-heart communication, we don't think about encoding, wrapping the messages, delivering the messages. We don't think, how do we wrap the conversation, how we guide the conversation, what is the topic, what kind of words we use. And if we do this heart-to-heart communication to a person that is not very close to us, or maybe it's my wife and my husband, but we have sensitive issues, we have conflict about previous conversation, this heart-to-heart communication is not recommendable. We can bring things in a manner that will be totally misunderstood. We can use a tone of our voice which we don't control. We don't even know how we express ourselves. It's happened many times that when we talk in such a way, you communicate to your wife a message, and then your wife says, "Man, you're so mad. What's going on with you?" Then the husband says, "Me? I'm not mad. I just want to converse with you." I remember once in one family conference in Latin America, one sister told us her husband sometimes gets angry and begins talking to her. Then she, instead of answering, she grabbed from somewhere a mirror and showed him the mirror. When he see his face, he said, "Oh, my wife, sorry, I didn't know I have such an angry and ugly face." That is what happened with heart-to-heart communication, and especially if we have already problematic issues in the family, it is better that these heart-to-heart communications happen to the pastor, happen to a counselor, happen to a professional who can advise us, who can help us, and who will not take it negatively, then, and especially be very careful with our children. If they can do heart-to-heart communications to us, we should be very careful doing the same to them, because we can offend them, we can be angry with our children, we can misunderstand them, and after we say the message not well prepared, offensive, these are things that children will never forget. And sometimes these are offenses that can go until the rest of their lives. That's why, dear brothers and sisters, let's be very careful to lead this communication in a right form. Heart-to-heart communication in a basic matters, it's very useful. It's very good, especially when we are on the table. We're talking about food, we're talking about school, we're talking about playing games. There is no problem of misunderstanding. There is no problem of misinterpretation. So we can do heart-to-heart communication. We can share our thoughts freely. and this is very helpful and very very nice. If we have free from problem and free from conflict family environment, this heart-to-heart communication, it's very nice. It's bring atmosphere, heavenly atmosphere in the family, trust between children and parents, and also bring us very close together. The children feels that they are understood and heard, and also the parents feels that their children are following, copying what they say, and they understand each other well. As conclusion, let's remember our conversation have encoding and decoding. If something happened in the conversation which we don't understand, please ask questions. Don't jump into the interpretation. Interpretation is very important if the interpretation is done properly. Ask more questions to make sure that your interpretation is correct. Basic conversation is the one we need to keep based on our needs and things related to facts that are not misinterpreted and not misunderstood. Intellectual conversation is very pleasant, very nice if we can do it. If we not, we better keep into the basic conversation. Spiritual conversation is very important, should take place every day, everywhere, if we are believers and we love our Lord Jesus Christ. And heart-to-heart communication lets this happen with much care, but with much love and understanding and tolerance. May the Lord bless you, dear brothers and sisters. I hope this lecture have been helpful to you, and questions and answers also will be given after the lecture. God bless you, and blessed Sabbath day. Amen.